In 1990, two brothers uncovered something in their grandfather's attic, a collection of documents that was going to expose a 170-year-old scandal. Now, here's where that comes from. In 1832, there were 57 teenagers from County Tyrone and Donegal in Ireland that were recruited by a fellow named Philip Duffy. Duffy was a railroad contractor working for what would be known today as the Pennsylvania Railroad. And he recruited them, brought them over to the United States, and put them to work on a dangerous, difficult task, cutting a channel through the Allegheny Mountains for the railroad. And this was just the most difficult, backbreaking work you could possibly imagine. Clearing trees and moving hundreds of tons of fill and debris, blasting rock, all for a pittance. Now, what they had signed up for was something that was going to give them a good living, but not realizing all the difficulties. And oh, by the way, they weren't paying what he had promised them over in Ireland. By August of that year, 2 months after they arrived, cholera had swept through the entire area. Philadelphia, in August of that year, was losing 80 people per day to cholera. The bodies were mounting up like crazy. And the 57 men in that camp apparently tried to escape, so they didn't get cholera as well. But they were confronted by angry locals that didn't want these youth that could be cholera affected coming into their communities, and they blocked them. So just imagine what it was like. These teenage boys, they've got cholera behind them, and they've got a hateful community that's resisting them in front of them. And as the story goes, they all succumbed to cholera. Except that wasn't the real story. That was the myth. The story that was perpetrated by the media and the news and the railroad. The reality of what happened came out after this box of documents was exposed. Forensic scientists and anthropologists from the University of Pennsylvania looked at that, went out to the site, and what they uncovered was the body of these 57. And doing forensic analysis, they discovered that they had not died of cholera. Their heads had been smashed in, and their bones had bullets in them. These young boys had been massacred, not dying of cholera. And why was that? Well, you have to understand, in the early 1800s, there was a lot of anti-Irish settlement. They had signs all over the place. You know, if you're Irish or you're black, go home. They didn't want the Irish here. There was huge anti-immigrant anger. And that anger was what caused a group of vigilantes to come into the camp that night and destroy the lives of these 57 young men. And the community unceremoniously buried them in unmarked graves where they thought they would reside, being undiscovered. But forensic science had a different idea. When they went out with ground-penetrating radar and the latest DNA tools, they were able to give these bodies names and identities. Now just think about what happened in that 170 years of repressed history. Irish mothers waiting for a letter from their son that never came. And what's worse is the railroad scrubbed their payroll records so it showed that they never worked on the Duffy's cut. And the doctors were bribed to falsify the medical records. And they almost got away with it, except for that box of documents that the two grandsons found. Now, I bring this up, and I think the reason why this is important is we have seen stories like this in the past. Anti-Irish, remember the anti-Chinese, the immigrants that worked on the railroads, the anti-Italian movement, and let's not forget the internment of American Japanese during World War II. And the Duffy Cut massacre was not just an isolated event. In fact, I'm going to suggest to you it was a blueprint for anti-immigrant sentiment that unfortunately in the days we live in today, we know still exists. But every time you see a train running down the tracks, just remember, in the vibration of the trains over those rails also lives the lives of these 57 young Irish teenagers that lost their lives due to hate. Thank you.